You know, something we believe here is that God is 100% for you and that God is for us. And not only is God for us, but God desires for us to experience a rich relational intimacy.
They were so real with their brokenness and so real with their struggles that they were willing to finally kind of come together, and she gave over stuff to him and he took it on. And in that moment, it was like they realized what a puzzle piece, two puzzle pieces coming together.
It's the ability to love well.
Hey, what's up, North Point? My name is Jeremy.
And my name is Josh, and we are so glad that you are tuning in today.
This past week, we posted a video of blooper reels of Jordan and Matt this past week because this hosting bit doesn't always go as smoothly as planned, but I think we're off to a pretty good start right now.
Yeah. I don't remember what else to say next.
But anyways, our goal here is to create content for you, your family, and friends that inspires you to follow Jesus. One of the things that we say all the time is that following Jesus makes life better and makes you better at life.
And if you want to get access to all of that content, there are a couple ways that you can do that. First, you can click connect with us below in the chat, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, but definitely follow us on social media because that's where we'll be posting all the content throughout the week.
Yes, and today, if you're married, are in a relationship, or desire to be married one day, or just want to learn about how to have better relationships, then it's a perfect conversation for you because we're actually talking about what it looks like to take a fresh start when it comes to relationships and marriage. And our lead pastor, Buck, is going to be having a conversation with a couple here at North Point named Jen and Craig Ferguson. You're good friends with Craig, right?
Yeah, he's an awesome dude.
And they actually created and lead our Marriage Matters groups. They've written a book together. I am so pumped to hear what they have to say, and I'm excited for you to hear it as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. And speaking of exciting, on August 9th, we are launching something called Meetups, where you get the opportunity to connect with people in the community and in the North Point family around shared interests. For example, I really want to do a meetup around rock climbing if possible, and I heard someone mention maybe something about live music.
Yeah, eventually there's going to be some live music. You should start the one on rock climbing. I think that you should just lead that up. I think that'd be great.
I love it.
Yeah. But there's actually a long list. We have knitting, crocheting, painting, off-roading, a Zoom call on parenting. We have mountain biking, fishing, boating, wakeboarding. We have pickleball. I don't even know what pickleball is, but I think I want to do it. It sounds fun. We have ultimate frisbee, road biking, and interview resume writing. There is so many things.
Yeah, you want to go to knitting with me?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, yeah, well, tons of super fun things. There's bound to be something that you're interested in there too. So definitely be sure to tune in next week because we will have a lot more information for you right here.
Well, we're going to get into this conversation, but before we jump in, we wanted to say a quick thank you to those of you who financially invest in the mission and vision of North Point. We are right in the process of ramping some really exciting things for the fall, from meetups to small groups to podcasts, other forms of content, all in hopes of making a big impact in our community, inspiring people to follow Jesus, and you make that possible. But if you've never given to North Point before and you want to partner with us, simply go to mpaustin.com/give for more info on that.
Yes, and with all that said, here is part 3 of Fresh Start.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. You know, something we believe here is that God is 100% for you and that God is for us. And not only is God for us, but God desires for us to experience a rich relational intimacy, to be fully known and fully loved, to experience that closeness, that deep level of trust, regardless of what kind of relationship it is, if it's a marriage relationship, a friendship, a parenting relationship. But here's the deal, guys. I think we are brilliant at messing our relationships up. I mean, starting with me. In fact, just this last week, I ran across some latest statistics that said every 36 seconds in the United States of America, somebody experiences a divorce. In fact, at the end of a given day, that would mean over 2,000 divorces happen in the U.S. And that's not only true when it comes to marriages, but when you read the research about dating relationships and a second marriage and a third marriage and parenting relationships, all that data points to the fact that we are brilliant at messing our relationships up. So today, I am so looking forward to this conversation where we're going to talk about how we can experience a fresh start relationally and ultimately experience what God has for us. And so to help us with this conversation, I want to introduce you to Jen and Craig Ferguson, who are experts on relationships and experts on marriage. So guys, thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit blown away by the whole expert thing. I think one thing that we are definitely experts at is making those relational mistakes and messing up. So,
And learning from him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, I think we're all part of that for sure.
For
So, hey, for real, thank you guys for being here. And I'm really excited to dive into the conversation about relationships. But before we do, I'm just curious about y'all's relationship. So where did you guys meet? And when you met the first time, was it like love at first sight? Were there like butterflies and all these sparkles happening? Was it that moment? Or like, talk about that. Where'd you guys first meet?
Yeah, well, so I was 19, so, definitely still in those teenager, lovey-dovey eye kind of state of mind. And I was in town from college, and I was going to help out at a youth group lock-in, a Good Friday lock-in.
A Good Friday lock-in?
Yes.
Okay, so that's got to be a church thing, because like most people meet in bars or most people meet at work, but a Good Friday lock-in?
I know, it just goes to show you never know when you're going to meet your special someone.
Exactly.
But yeah, basically a lock-in is where you sign up to spend all night with a bunch of crazy kids and play games like Bop It all night long.
Sounds
and then
wild.
occasionally talk about Jesus. So,
Yes.
loads of fun. But yes, that is where we met. And I first saw him getting out of his car in the parking lot, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, oh my gosh, no, I am not here for men or boys or whatever you call them. I am here for Jesus. I'm here for the kids.
But then all of a sudden, Craig,
Yep,
and
all of a
voila.
sudden, Craig.
So you had butterflies. It was like love at first sight.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, how about you? Like when you saw Jen, was it the same where there's like little Tweety birds all around?
Yeah, I was definitely spitting for sure. I played it cool though, I was trying to maintain my composure and coolness and not lead on too much. But yeah, there was definitely like, God was like, there's something here for sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, we've talked about this a little bit, and you actually did something on your first date that I think is pretty forward. So what happened there?
Yeah, so my children, if they watch this, they're totally going to be cringing right
Yes.
now. But yes, so we met in April, and our first date was in May. And then on the way home, he was taking me home. I told him I loved him.
Now, what were you thinking? Were you like, oh my gosh, like this lady is a little bit forward, or,
Slow down.
Yeah.
There was definitely feelings there for sure.
Sure.
But how I responded there, because I could tell, because I didn't immediately respond in the affirmative, that there were some hurt feelers there. And so I asked her a question. I said, well, let me ask you, how many people have told you, how many boys that you dated have said that they loved you? And she didn't really have a numerical response.
Right.
But my follow-up question was, where are they?
Yeah.
Where are they right now? And I told her that if I say that I love you, that means that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Like, that means that you were the one for me.
Yes. And then what happened is 11 days later,
Yeah.
you actually said,
Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah.
And then when you said that, then you guys got engaged,
We did.
which is crazy. After 11 days, bam,
Yep.
here you go, moving into the whole marriage scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
We've
feels
been
pretty
married
quick.
for 20 years, so I think it's gonna last.
Yes.
I think
Yeah, yeah,
rushing into anything too crazy.
that's right. So you just said you guys have been married 20 years. Do you guys have kiddos?
Yep. We have two girls, Abby and Hannah.
Okay.
Abby just got her license. She's 16.
You
Yep.
guys doing okay?
Yes, we are.
And the car's doing well too.
Yeah, exactly. Hannah's 14 and a half, which means in November she's going to have her permit. So then
Oh,
we're going to
wow.
have two kids driving around, and that just feels like it's a whole new level of parenting.
Wow, that's a little bit scary. Well, guys, thank you for sharing all that like personal insight into how you guys met. And here's the deal: I know that you guys lead Marriage Matters here at North Point, and I'm incredibly grateful. And you guys have seen a lot of relationships in terms of marriage relationships, long-term relationships. And so I'm just curious, what got you guys into leading Marriage Matters, because that's hard. I mean, relationships are difficult, and like I said earlier, I mean, we're all brilliant at messing these things up. So why'd you guys decide to lead that?
Yeah. So I think we wrote it about three years ago, 3.5 years ago. And part of it is because we have been through so many relational disasters ourselves. And because we had been able to overcome so much, I mean, really only by the grace of God, we were super passionate about helping other couples know that it can look really, really dark. And you can look at your life and you look at your marriage and say, I see no way out, but there is. And I think because we discovered that for ourselves, the natural overflow of that is we want to tell other people, like, there is hope for you too. If there is hope for us, like, we are not special.
Right.
It is available to you too.
Yeah.
And so because we've been so public with different aspects of our stories, we even before we came to North Point, we knew a lot of people were struggling in their marriage. And one of the number one things that we found that people were struggling with, just like we did, was this inability to kind of find that connection, that emotional, spiritual connection, that where you feel that fully known and fully loved.
Right.
It's so easy to just kind of get caught up in everyday life that you just keep missing each other. And so we wanted to write something that helped couples actually see each other again. And so we knew we wanted to write something, and we knew that we wanted it to be accessible to anyone. Whether you are a follower of Christ or not, you can still make progress on your relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that vulnerability is there to go, hey guys, we've messed up so many times. We're actually writing down our mess ups and planning this whole kind of curriculum around that.
Right.
And just these life lessons basically, which is awesome. Now, Craig, I mean, you're a dude, and as a dude kind of wading into these relationships and the messes of relationships, what motivated you? Because a lot of guys are like, I'm going to stay, away from relationships and all that kind of stuff. Or
Yeah, I mean, we, like Jim mentioned, we kind of moved through these struggles alone and by ourselves. We didn't really have a whole lot of support. And so as we kind of fumbled along together with God's help, we learned a lot from our mistakes. And what we wanted to do is create this environment where couples could come together and learn more about each other, but also other couples could come together and build a community of support around one another, because we're all struggling with the same stuff. Like, we're all trying to do life together. And so we wanted to be able to create this environment where people could come together and just be themselves and be real with each other and help each other and encourage one another and support one another.
Yeah, I love that. And in fact, just this last week or maybe a couple weeks ago, I read this stat that said 3 out of 5 Americans feel lonely, and 25% of Americans would say no one really knows them or no one really understands them. And so I love the fact that you guys were willing to say, hey, let's come together because we're not alone in this, and build that community and just talk about the marriage relationship through Marriage Matters. So awesome. Thank you guys for doing that. So here's the deal. I know that in Marriage Matters, you guys have seen a lot of relationships come in, and it's like their last ditch effort. Like, I think you guys said like 50-60% of the couples that come in are like, we're at the end of our rope.
Yeah.
And so you have seen a lot of what leads to relational brokenness. You've seen a lot that leads to this gap in relationships and really requires a fresh start. So can you talk about that just from your observations and say, what are the things that you think really leads to this relational brokenness?
Yeah, I think primarily we all struggle with communication. Like, what we say, how we say it, when we say it, all that can lead to struggles within relationships. And as we were kind of talking through this before, there was a study done by the Gottman Institute where they took thousands of couples. And at the end of the study, they were able to break it down within a 10 to 15 minute window of just observing a couple communicating and how they communicate, particularly in conflict.
Right.
They could determine with over 90% accuracy whether or not that couple would be divorced within 3 to 5 years.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with that,
Yeah.
that whole study. And what's crazy, 10 to 15 minutes with 90% accuracy can predict whether or not that couple's going to stay together.
Purely on how they talk to each other.
Yeah, it just like emphasizes how important communication is.
Yeah.
And that's true for, married couples. That's true for, parenting relationships, dating relationships, any kind of relationship. Communication is critical. So when that breaks down, begins to create some gaps in that relationship. What else would you guys say you just seen on the other side of a whole lot of, amazing people.
I think something that we have really struggled with, especially in this season of COVID-19, is upside down priorities. I feel like in the first maybe month or two, priority number one was to diffuse all the crisis and chaotic situations that seem to be popping up literally every 5 minutes. And for us, because we have 2 teenage girls who really thrive either in dance or at school, and especially my oldest that is very, very social, it was every disappointment was like a level 10. And so trying to manage that was really difficult. But even if you take COVID-19 and put that on the back burner for a second, I mean, our lives were really ruled by our kids' extracurricular activities. Every single weekend there was something. And so there was like never time to go on a date. And sometimes we would get, and I think in past seasons and in this season, you get to the end of the day and you're just so tired that you're like, well, I see you sitting there, but I don't have any energy to talk to you.
Right.
Much less like start talking about dreams and passions, and because you don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring.
Right. And I think here's the deal. I don't think people intentionally do that. In other words, I don't think people are going, oh, I'm just not going to pay attention to my marriage. I think it just happens.
Totally.
I think life happens. I mean, you have kids, work's busy, life's busy, financial things, hobby things. And then all of a sudden it's like, when's the last time we really paid attention to our marriage and we're intentional at discovering one another? And
well, and I think too, it's like almost if you were to write down your priorities, like our marriage needs to have its own line. Like it is its own identity. There's this book that we use in Marriage Matters. It's called The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. And he talks about like you have to view your marriage as if it is its own entity.
Right.
And you need to give to that entity just like you would give to any of the other priorities in your life. Like you can't just take it for granted. And I think that that's something that people struggle with, that we all struggle with. You just kind of start taking for granted the person who lives in the house with you.
Absolutely. Well, as you're talking, like I'm feeling this conviction because I'm thinking about Jill and I right now, and I'm just telling you, with COVID-19, with all 5 of our boys being at home, with the changes here at North Point, I mean, it has been kind of on the back burner for us, our marriage, and I can feel that, and I get irritable, and Jill gets irritable, and the gap just kind of grows. And again, I don't think we're intentionally doing this,
right?
But we're certainly not being intentional with our marriage, and I can feel that. And so thanks for bringing that up.
Anything for you, Buck.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So what else would you guys say? Anything else that creates the gaps in relationships that you guys have just seen?
Yeah, kind of related to what you guys were both saying. It's the ability to love well. And I'm thinking about that story from Luke chapter 10 where the lawyer's asking, Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And so Jesus and him are having this conversation. Is love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. And there's 3 people involved with that, right? There's God, there's your neighbor, and there's yourself. And I think where we struggle is we understand and we get like loving God, especially in the church world, right?
Right.
And we even get loving our neighbor, but we often neglect the love of ourselves.
That's good.
And that has cascading impacts in all of our relationships. Jen said something once that I thought was really profound. It's like you can't give away something you don't possess, right? So if you don't understand how to love yourself well, how can you possibly know how to love others and love God well?
Right. That's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. What you said just made me really think about why willpower only goes so far. Like we can say, okay, I'm going to really, really do a good job of loving my spouse today, and I'm going to do these 3 things, and I'm going to, and I have all this motivation and desire. But if I am empty, like if I'm not getting what I want or what I need from Jesus and knowing that he's going to love me no matter what, like I'm just going to run dry. And I think that's part of the key to this whole thing is, being able to go before God and say, I need you to give me what I need for my relationship.
Right.
And knowing that that's like a fountain that's always overflowing. It never is going to run out.
Yeah.
And it's so simple as that even if you don't, you're not a follower of Christ, like just going before and like, okay, what does it look like to experience God's love today? And just seeing.
Man, I love that. And it's that idea, I so want to give this, but if I'm not receiving that, it's very difficult to give. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I think there are a whole lot of things that create gaps in relationships, and communication, I think, for a dating relationship, marriage relationship, parenting relationship, I think that's key. And if that's not going well, it creates the gaps there. I think, when we're not intentional with any kind of relationship, that also creates a gap and a need to have a fresh start. And then I think that idea about just feeling nourished, feeling loved, feeling accepted, feeling I'm enough. That is a great motivation. When that's not there, it certainly can create some gaps. So let's turn a corner a little bit. And, those are some of the reasons why we see gaps and need a fresh start in relationships. But as you guys think about seeing couples and you guys personally experiencing a fresh start in a relationship, what are the things that you think are tools or steps that really lead to a fresh start relationally?
Yeah, and foundationally, there needs to be commitment. Right? And we use that C word kind of flippantly sometimes, but what that looks practically is where you are in the relationship and you are displaying behaviors and you're choosing behaviors that communicate the intentionality and that commitment. Like a good example is, if Jennifer and I are having a conversation and I can tell that she really wants my attention, I'm not going to have my phone out.
Right.
Right? I'm going to put my phone down. Or better yet, I'm not even going to bring it into the room with me. That way we have that conversation. And I'm going to face her and I'm going to look her in the face. And my thoughts are going to be about what she's saying, not about what I did yesterday or what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Right.
And it's really communicating, hey, you are the most important thing to me right now in this moment. Yeah.
And that commitment, that's 100% true. Like, you've got to have both feet in the relationship, and both people have to, if they're going to move forward and experience a fresh start. And that makes a lot of sense. But my question is this, is I meet with a lot of people who will sit down and say, Buck, here's where my relationship's at. We really need a fresh start. And I'm committed, but my spouse isn't. I'm committed, but my significant other isn't. So what would you say to that person?
From personal experience, I know what that feels like. And there have been days where I'm like, I know I'm all in, but I can't tell if he is. And especially when we were going through some of our bigger things, that I was like, I just don't understand why you won't change and why you won't be this way. And here is my 5-step plan to help you be a better person and fit my needs.
And how'd that work out for you?
It did not.
It didn't.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Because you so want to know. I think we're all desire. It's hard to give of ourselves when we don't know it's going to be given back. And so it takes a big leap of faith to be like, I'm going to continue to be committed, put my best foot forward, to love well, even though I don't know that it's going to be returned in the way that I think it should be returned. And sometimes we make assumptions that the other person isn't committed because they're not checking all these boxes, but they may be checking a whole other set of boxes that aren't even on our radar.
Right.
So I get that. Sometimes there have been times I've been having my time with God in the morning, and I'm like, how long, O Lord? How long, O Lord, are we going to struggle with this? How long, O Lord, am I going to feel this pain? But the truth is there's a whole nother journey that our spouse is going on with God with, or even personally, that we don't always have a front row seat to.
Right. And I think I love what you said, because it's like, you want to change people, but the reality is we can't.
Right.
And I think our best chance to get commitment of both parties is actually our personal commitment.
Yes.
To say, hey, I'm in, and that gives us the best probability to experience that commitment.
For
but
sure.
that is incredibly, incredibly difficult.
It is.
Yeah. So what would you guys say in terms of just, that's a great motivator to get us into to help us with commitment? Because it's so hard and it can feel so lonely. Is there any practical advice you would just say to help us with our commitment?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we do the first week of Marriage Matters, which I really love, I love this activity, is as a part of getting to know the couples and hearing their stories. And one of the things we ask them is, well, how did y'all meet? Just like you kind of started with us. And I think we've yet to experience a couple as they start to describe that first meeting, the first date, the time when they realized, okay, this is the one that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And they're talking about the engagement,
right.
All the preparation around that. You can just see their face just light up.
That's
right?
cool.
They may have come into that room separate.
Right.
Right. And not even want to sit next to each other. But when they start talking about that moment, you can see there's that connection. And I think it's important to remember those and to kind of talk about that, because at one point in time, that was the most important. They were the most important person to you,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
That's so good.
So I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to watch that physiological reaction
Yeah.
that we all have when we're remembering something good. And it reminds me in the Old Testament how God consistently told the Israelites, hey, remember how I took you through the Red Sea. Remember how I provided, bread and manna from the sky. Remember how much I've loved you. Remember how much I've provided for you. And in that remembering, it kind of like resets us. Like that is the first step of our fresh start, is resetting and remembering, why this all started in the first place.
Right.
And just feeling all those feelings, because feelings are important. Like, you say often feelings aren't facts.
Yeah.
They're not always facts, but feelings can really change how we view things.
Absolutely. And they're
our
great
motivation.
motivators.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's so helpful and practical, just to go like, hey, let's go back, remember, what the attraction, remember what happened at the beginning, remember those things that are foundational, because that is a great motivator for commitment.
Yeah.
I love that. What else would you guys say are just keys to experiencing a fresh start relationally?
I think it's important too that we recognize that we're all broken people, right? No one's perfect. No one has it all together. We certainly don't have it all together.
For sure.
And, as Jen and I were kind of talking through this, one of the things that I remembered is she's done women's retreats before, and they do this activity where they'll take these different colored pottery and they'll break it. And then they build a art project around these broken pieces. And it made me think about, that's what God does in our relationships, is he takes the broken pieces of our life, our past, our traumas, our heart wounds, and if we allow him in, if we grant him access and permission to use those broken pieces, he can build something beautiful in our relationship.
Yeah.
And I think he wants to do that. But the trick there, the key, is to invite him into that process and then give him access and permission to take those broken pieces and put that together.
Right. And Craig, I love what you said there, because it's the idea of taking our past, which oftentimes we bring into our relationships.
Yeah.
And many times the relational issue is not the issue. It's actually something from the past, this broken piece of that kind of mosaic, as you were talking about. And when we go back and we begin to deal with the things of our past, it oftentimes allows us to take that step forward and experience that fresh start relationally. But we got to go back and deal with what's happened in the past. I really love that. What else would you guys say in addition to, the idea of commitment, the idea of going back and really looking at the pieces of your past? Anything else you would add?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really helped us have a fresh start, and it, fresh starts happen daily sometimes, right? Like,
Absolutely.
It's
His
like
mercies
this
are
one,
new every morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One last hurrah, like every day. And so one of the things that we recognized early on is the fact that we communicate differently. And so when we would have conflict, I would want to sit down at the table and hash it all out in one fell swoop and say all the things that I'm possibly thinking. And he wanted to go away and deal with his own feelings. And sometimes he wouldn't want to come back. And so we were having this, I thought that when he was leaving, he didn't want to talk to me. It wasn't important for him to work it out. But what we learned in how we had that fresh start is this epiphany that, okay, we just communicate and process differently. And so I had to realize that I didn't really want to be at a table with him hashing it all out, because he was going to say things that he probably didn't mean. Like, he needed time to go away and reflect and think about what he really wanted to say. And then he recognized for me that I needed him to take the initiative to come back and have that conversation. So then I wasn't feeling abandoned and left behind. And so one of those things of having a fresh start is just entertaining that perhaps how you view the situation isn't the only way to view that situation. That you can really entertain someone else's perspective, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong or they're wrong. It's just, I'm going to put myself in his shoes or in her shoes and see how it might be on the other side of me.
Right. Man, that is so good. That is so hard, because it's like, hey, I want everybody to be like me.
Right.
And why wouldn't they think the way I think and act the way I act? But that idea to go, hey, before being, seeking to be understood, I need to understand you and what's your makeup. And that's where like personality profiles are, come in. That's where it's like, hey, respond versus react. Like, don't jump in, like, because they may be different. And recognizing those things, I think, is brilliant at leading to a fresh start. So, guys, I think those are really helpful in terms of relationships and all relationships to take some steps to experience a fresh start. And one of the cool things that I know of you is you guys have sat on the other side of so many relationships that you've watched people come in and there's just brokenness and it feels like they've lost hope. But then you've watched that come full circle and they've regained that hope. And there is a fresh start and you get a front row seat to that, which is really cool in leading Marriage Matters and a lot of things you guys have done. So are there any stories that kind of capture what we've talked about today that you would share?
Yeah, honestly, it was hard to narrow it down to one, which is the coolest thing. It's
That's a good problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like there's so many hopeful stories that we could share. But there was one in particular when we were on our first group meeting. They were answering their question, and at the end they said, by the way, this is our last ditch effort. Like, if this doesn't help us, then we're getting divorced. And in the moment you're like, pressure.
That's pressure,
You
yeah.
know? I mean, not because we think that we're doing anything to actually solve their problems or help make them better. It's just, you don't want any marriages to fail like that. And so it was so interesting because in a series of conversations, like you could tell, like they were really all in. And I remember the first time the guy cried in group because he was actually absorbing all of this and processing through some of those childhood things. So the wife in the relationship is a super high achiever, felt like it was her job to assume all the roles and responsibilities that come with working and having a family. He was raised by 3 older sisters and a mom who did everything for him. So he didn't even know that he had responsibilities on some level, and nor did he know that he had what it took to actually have fruitful relationships and try hard and have good results. And so they were so real with their brokenness and so real with their struggles that they were willing to finally kind of come together, and she gave over stuff to him and he took it on. And in that moment, it was like they realized what a puzzle piece, 2 puzzle pieces coming together, because she was able to recognize his strength and he was able to recognize her strength. And they were like, oh my gosh, like maybe there is a reason why we were put together. And so it's just amazing to see them reaffirming their commitment, being willing to go back to the past and entertaining each other's perspectives. Like, this is really what it's like when you were a kid, and now I understand why you have these behaviors, and this is what it was like when you were a kid, and I totally get this now. And so the most fun thing is that at the end of the group, I guess about 8 months later, so one of the activities that you do in Marriage Matters, you draw a blueprint for your dream house. They actually found and bought their dream house.
Wow.
8 months later. So
Wow.
I mean, signing a 30-year mortgage, nothing says commitment like that.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. Hey, you're in for the long haul.
Right.
Wow, that's incredible. And I love those stories because it just gives us all hope wherever our relationships are at. The fact that, there's so many stories of a fresh start relationally, that whatever's going on, perhaps, that can be our story as well. It can be Jill and I's story and y'all's story and our story. So, hey, thank you guys so much for leading that and just being willing and vulnerable. I love that posture of leadership to say, hey, we honestly aren't the experts, but there's so many things we've learned in life. Let's come together and let's see if we can all experience a relational fresh start. And that's what you guys have done. So thank you again for your leadership there. Hey, any last things you would just add to this conversation as we wrap up?
Well, Buck, as you may know, I'm on staff here at North Point.
Oh, I do know.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And my passion really is to help get people connected into group. So I would just say for anyone out there watching, if you're struggling in your marriage, if you don't know how to make a fresh start, if you're really bumping up against the same obstacles or going through the same cycles over and over again, the good news is we have 2 brand new Marriage Matters groups that are going to be starting at the end of September. So you can go to mpaustin.com and sign up, put your name on the wait list, and I think that would be amazing.
That's
would
awesome.
love to connect with anyone.
That's really cool. Hey, let me just ask. So if somebody's in a long-term relationship, but they're not married, can they be part of Marriage Matters?
For sure.
Okay. Very cool. Well, hey, is there anything else that you guys would add to this conversation as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think, too, that, you can do all of the quote unquote right things, check all the boxes and, work on your communication and be intentional. But there are other things that might be lurking kind of in the shadows or underneath the surface. And there was definitely that in our relationship that would continue to raise its ugly head from time to time that we had to really, really deal with. And I think it was really hard for us, but I think that it's important to remember that, when you're experiencing those moments, you're not alone.
Right.
There are other people that are sharing those same struggles with you, and we should talk about those.
I love what you said, and I like how you phrased that, like in the shadows or below the surface. And I remember the first time I really met you guys and heard your story was in my office, and you were very vulnerable, and you actually shared what that was in the shadows, below the surface, and talked about the fact that you kept checking all the relational boxes, but there was something that was holding you back and holding you back and holding you back. And you guys have been so brave with this conversation. You've been very honest with it. You actually have written a book and gone public with, hey, here's our story. You've done podcasts, and I know that's got to be incredibly difficult, but at the same time, so helpful. And what I'm really excited about is in a couple days, we're going to have Overtime. And guys, you got to tune into this. We're going to do a podcast in Overtime in just a few days, and we're going to talk about what that was below the surface. And I think it's going to be extraordinarily helpful. Hey, thank you guys for just having this conversation, for being so brave and honest with your story, and just for your leadership and love of people. I think that's awesome. Well, listen, for all of us, I think all of us desire to experience what God has for us relationally. And I think it's possible. I think Craig and Jen painted this picture that we can all take some practical steps. And maybe for you in your relationship, whatever kind of relationship that is, maybe this week to think about the commitment and going back to when you first met, or going back to what first attracted you to that person. It's a great motivator for your commitment. And maybe that's a great step to take this week. Or maybe it's simply just dealing with your past. So often our relationships feel this sense of brokenness because it's not a relational issue, but it's a past issue. And maybe this week it's calling the North Point office and sitting down with one of our pastors, or sitting down with one of our staff members, or maybe calling a counselor and saying, hey, I've got to deal with what's in my past. Because if we can deal with what's in our past, it frees us to experience a fresh start relationally. Whatever it is, doing something new, doing something different is what leads to a fresh start and ultimately experiencing what God has for us. Guys, thanks so much again for tuning in. Let me go ahead and just pray for us and pray for our time. Father, thank you so much again for today. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for the fact that you love us enough to allow us to experience fresh starts relationally. And God, you want that for us. So I just pray this week for all of us, wherever we're at in our relationships, that you give us the courage to take whatever step it is to begin to experience a fresh start relationally. God, thank you for this moment. In Jesus' name, amen.